Last night, I revisited one of my favorite childhood movies. It's called The Never Ending Story. And in that movie, one of the characters said, "It must hurt if it is to heal." And those words stung me. They really cut at me to my core. I felt them tremendously. If you knew me a few years ago, you would have said, Julia, yeah, she has a lot of energy. She is someone who's always moving, always keeping busy. And you would be right. That Julia back then, was the kind of person who would juggle 10 things at once. Not only a few years ago was I juggling my own business that I ran completely by myself, I was also juggling dog walking full time. I was also juggling trying to date full time. I was also kickboxing, doing Zumba, trying to be a good friend to people, trying to be in a relationship, everything that you could imagine. And I was running absolutely and completely from everything. And I was running on E. I never could sit still. I never knew how to relax. I never knew how to relax until recently. Very recently. But the truth is that in order for us to thrive, we have to recharge. Everything in life has to recharge in order for it to thrive. That's why we have to go to sleep. That's why cars need gasoline or need solar power. When we go to sleep, we're able to connect to the pathways of our dreams. When we are asleep, we are relaxed enough to allow for the universe to communicate to us about what is happening in our waking life. I didn't even have dreams until a few years ago. I didn't even allow myself to fully fall asleep at night. How many of you can identify with that? If I had dreams, I couldn't remember them. But a few years ago, I had a dream that has stuck with me for a really long time. And the dream was about my father. In the dream, I fell and I cut my knee. And I went to see my father and show him my wound. And even though he was talking to me in a really caring way, the wound, as he was talking to me, was festering and was burning, and it was becoming an even bigger sore. And I couldn't figure out in the dream why this was, why everything was hurting more and more on my knee, until I looked down at my knee and I realized that in his hand, my father had this small, tiny knife. And every word that he said to me, with every word, he was scraping the knife against my wound, almost like he was chipping away at any of the remaining skin that was around my wound so it couldn't heal. He was chipping away at it like a sore. And I remember waking up from that dream and sharing it with the person that I was dating at the time. And she said to me, you really need to address what's going on with your father. And that was the first time that someone told me something like that. But have you ever had something that really hurt and people told you, just don't pay attention to it. Just forget about it. Who cares? You know, like, you'll get over it. Just focus on something else. That had been my whole life. My whole life was about focusing on something else. Focusing on other people, focusing on my job, focusing on fixing other people, never listening to within, never listening to my own feelings. So I was always running because I didn't want to face anything. And so when she told me I needed to address what was happening between me and my father, like everything else, I ignored it. I didn't focus on it. I ignored her advice. And I kept doing what I'd always been doing. I kept running. I kept running on to the next thing. And you know what? You can run for a long, long time. But you cannot run forever. And honey, the universe knows when it's time for you to stop running. The universe knows when it is time for you to stop running. And that's what happened to me. At the time, I was working at this restaurant as a bartender. And this was a few years after I had that dream of my father. I had been working there. I had been walking dogs. I was doing all this stuff, right? And I got this phone call. It was a voicemail. And I picked up the phone, listened to my voicemail, and it said, "Hi, Julia. Thank you for your service. As of today, because of severe complications, the restaurant is now closed." I said, "What?" I felt all different kinds of emotions because this is something that I've been pouring a lot of energy into, you know? I was making all this money, I was staying up late, I was bartending, I had learned how to do it, I had mastered the craft. It was something that I was good at. It was something I could focus all my energy and attention onto. And just like that, it closed. For weeks, I was so angry. And so I was trying to figure out what I could focus on, what else I could do. I was mad, I was sad, I was feeling all these different emotions. And then I just burnt out. My energy burnt out, and I sat down. And for the first time, I allowed my body to relax. I allowed my shoulders to fall to my sides. I allowed my fists that were always balled up to open up. And I opened my palms. and let my fingers relax. And I focused on my breath. And I just focused on breathing in and out. And I let my body relax onto the couch. And I just let go. And as I focused on my breath, I heard this voice from within in a low tone whisper to me, I was molested by my father. I can't really describe how I felt initially. It was more of a feeling of having like a bittersweet taste in your mouth. But it was at that moment that I realized why I was running, why I had been filling up my schedule with so many things, why it was so hard for me to relax, why I did everything I could to keep busy. It was the first time that I felt like I was looking at my childhood self, that inner child, in the mirror. That little girl, I saw her looking at me. It was like such an odd feeling, like when you are looking at a house and it looks really unrecognizable on the outside, but when you go inside, you realize that's the house that you've been living in your whole entire life. It was odd, like when you open a book and you start reading the first few pages and you realize that you've read that story before, that story had been inside of you all along. It felt like shock and calm. It felt like pain, but also a little bit of a realization of comfort in the fact that it was the first time I started to understand that I was running to avoid facing this truth, that I didn't want to admit it to myself, that my inner child had been jumping around and feeling so much anxiety and anger and not knowing what to do with herself. And it was my job to listen to her, and I hadn't been doing that. And my partner was in the other room when I had this message delivered to me, this realization, and I called her name, and when she came into the room, I told her what this voice had told me, and bawling in tears. And the tears, they felt like they were deep down in my stomach, in my belly. They were rising up from a long time of pain. And it was why, at that moment, I started to understand why I had put up with so many things in my life, why I had put up with so many unhealthy relationships, why I had let so many things happen to me. Because I rather let things happen to me than face my truth. And when I told her what happened, she just hugged me. And she just held me. And she just sat with me and listened. It was the first time I had ever been so vulnerable with anyone. And she believed me. A lot of times when we face our truths and we hear, from our inner child, the realization of traumas that we've experienced, whether sexual or physical or mental, we don't think people will believe us. We still see ourselves as that little child, and we feel like, who is going to believe our story? But she believed me. And I want to tell you today that I believe you. If you're struggling with something, I hear you and I believe you. And after revealing this to my partner and coming to terms with it for myself and sitting with it, I started writing about it. I wrote about it in my blog. I wrote about it on Instagram through video. I did a video about it on YouTube. And I thought, okay, I talked about it, I'm done. But today, the universe prompted me to share this story and this message with you. So I ask you today to think about this question. What am I running from? Really think about your life and ask yourself, what am I running from? What am I running from? The answer might not come right away. It may be hard for you to get to that point of honesty with yourself. It might be that you do what I do. You self-medicate to avoid, like I did. I self-medicated and I drank alcohol all the time because it was the only way I knew how to cope. And I didn't even know what I was coping from. I filled my schedule with so many things so I didn't have to be home. My life was a hot mess. My apartment was a hot mess. My dating life was a hot mess. And there was one time where I was struggling so much financially that I allowed myself to have a one-night stand so that I could have a steak dinner. We all have things in our life that we are running from. But the key is asking yourself those important questions. Your ego will tell you that meditation is a waste of time, that sitting still is a waste of time, that allowing yourself to relax is a waste of time, that you should always be filling your schedule with something. That's what I did because I didn't want to allow myself to focus on the pain. But you know what? I had to get to that point. I had to allow myself to listen to the pain, understand why it's there, and let it go. And in order to let it go, I had to forgive my father. And then, most importantly, I had to forgive myself. I had to forgive myself so that I could be free. What do you need to do so that you can be free? You can change your life because you can allow yourself to face your truths. You can allow yourself to feel the hurt so that you can heal. Remember, a lot of the things that we experience are part of our testimony for others. A lot of the things that we go through, they are for us to heal from so that we can help others who need to know that what they've experienced is something they can heal from. You can change your life because you can face your truths. It all starts with you. Thank you so much for listening. Have a beautiful, amazing day. If this resonates with you, leave me a comment, share this video, and thank you. I appreciate you listening. Have a beautiful day.